Hey everyone, welcome to this deep dive.
Yeah.
And today we're going to be tackling a topic that I think is pretty important and pretty close to home for a lot of us.
Absolutely.
Burnout and suicidal thoughts. Two things that
Yeah.
can feel really heavy, really weighty,
For sure.
but we want to hopefully leave you with some practical takeaways
Yeah,
and a sense of hope
absolutely.
if you're feeling kind of down or overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So we've got some great source material to work with today.
We do.
We've got a YouTube video by psychologist Laurie Santos,
Yeah.
and she's talking about burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got a collection of articles that are focused on coping with suicidal thoughts.
Yes.
And I thought it was really fascinating to learn that burnout isn't just,
Right.
like I'm stressed, I'm overworked.
Yeah.
It's actually a clinical syndrome.
It is. Yeah. And, recognizing it as that, I think can be really empowering
Yeah,
because it means there are specific things you can do to address it.
yeah, definitely. And, I think about how I've used that word burnout so casually in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, I'm so burned out. Like
Mm.
that time I was, juggling a million deadlines and living on like caffeine and willpower.
Yeah.
But was I really burned out? Was it just stress?
Right.
Like how many people are actually experiencing burnout
Yeah.
versus just like regular
Yeah.
overwhelm or stress?
Totally. And it's such an important distinction because stress is a normal part of life.
Right.
But burnout is something that can really have long-term consequences if it's not addressed.
Okay, so let's talk about like what actually defines burnout.
Yeah.
So in the video, Laurie Santos outlines 3 core symptoms:
Right.
emotional exhaustion,
Yeah.
depersonalization or cynicism,
Yes.
and reduced personal accomplishment.
Hmm.
So let's break those down a little bit. Emotional exhaustion, I think we can all relate to feeling drained after a long day.
For sure.
But she's saying this is like a much deeper level of depletion.
Yeah, it's not just physical tiredness. It's like this deep depletion of emotional resources.
So what does that look like?
Yeah, so imagine like you're running a marathon, but instead of physical energy, you're using up your emotional energy.
Okay.
So eventually you hit that wall
Uh-huh.
where you just can't give anymore. You might feel numb, detached, or even irritable.
Wow. Yeah, that paints a really vivid picture.
Yeah,
And then you go into depersonalization or cynicism.
right.
So have you ever felt so detached from your work that it felt meaningless?
Absolutely.
Like nothing you do matters.
Yeah, and that's depersonalization, and it can often lead to cynicism where you start to develop a negative attitude toward your job.
Right. Or the people around you.
Exactly. And that can make it even harder to find any motivation.
And then reduce personal accomplishment,
Yes.
where no matter how hard you work, you feel like you're not making any difference.
Mm-hmm. And that can be incredibly discouraging, especially if you're someone who really thrives on achievement and recognition.
Yeah.
It can make you question your abilities and your worth.
So if any of this is resonating with, you know that you're not alone.
You're definitely not alone.
And I think it's interesting that we tend to think of burnout as like a modern phenomenon.
Yeah.
But in the video, Dr. Santos actually mentions evidence of burnout-like symptoms going all the way back to the Industrial Revolution.
Isn't that fascinating?
It is. It really is. So people have been struggling with this for a long time.
Yeah, it makes you think about how the nature of work has changed over the centuries.
Right, and how those changes might be contributing to the problem today.
Exactly.
And then, fast forward to the 80s and 90s,
Mm-hmm.
psychologist Christina Maslach really starts doing some groundbreaking research on burnout.
Yes, she did.
And she identifies these 4 key contributors,
Right.
which one of them is excessive workload,
Yeah.
which is not surprising.
Not at all.
It's not just about the sheer volume of work either. It's the intensity,
The pressure. The pressure.
and the constant demands of our always-on culture.
Right. We're living in a culture that really glorifies busyness and productivity. It's true.
And it makes it hard to set boundaries,
Yeah.
to really prioritize our well-being.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the second contributor that she names is values mismatch.
Yes.
And this is when the reality of your job doesn't actually align with what you expected
Uh-huh.
or your core values.
Right.
So maybe you went into a field with a certain vision,
Mm-hmm.
but the day-to-day is totally different,
Yeah.
and you're feeling disillusioned and unfulfilled.
And that can be really tough to reconcile, especially if you've invested a lot of time and energy into a particular career path.
Totally. And in the video, Dr. Santos actually shares her own experience with burnout as a college professor.
I love that part.
especially during COVID.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not every day that you hear a Yale professor talk about playing Guitar Hero as a coping mechanism.
No, right.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show that burnout can affect anyone,
Yeah, it really can.
even those who seem to have it all.
Okay, so the third contributor is unfairness in the workplace.
Yes,
And this could be anything
it really could.
from feeling undervalued or underpaid
Mm,
to experiencing discrimination or harassment.
right.
So when you feel like you're not being treated fairly, it can be incredibly demoralizing.
Absolutely. And it can lead to feelings of resentment and anger,
Yeah.
which can definitely fuel burnout.
Right?
It's hard to stay motivated and engaged when you feel like the system is rigged against you.
And then the last contributor that she names is lack of intrinsic reward.
Yes.
And this is when you're doing something solely for the paycheck
Uh-huh.
or the external validation
Mm-hmm.
rather than finding any inherent satisfaction or meaning.
Right. It's like you're just going through the motions without feeling any passion or purpose for the work itself.
Yeah, and you know what I find really powerful about this framework?
What's that?
Is that it highlights that burnout isn't always a personal failing.
I agree.
Individual choices definitely play a role.
Of course.
But there are all these organizational factors and systemic issues that can be major contributors as well.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to address burnout from both an individual and an organizational level.
Okay, so let's shift gears and talk about what we can actually do about it.
Yes. Let's talk solutions.
Because there is hope.
Absolutely.
There are things that we can do both as individuals and as organizations
For sure.
to combat burnout and create a more supportive and fulfilling work environment.
Right. We don't have to just accept burnout as the status quo.
Exactly. So the video highlights a few things that organizations can do to address this.
Okay. Like what?
Well, they can adjust workloads
Yeah.
to make them more manageable.
Make them more reasonable.
Right. And they can clarify values and expectations so people know what's expected of them and how their work contributes to the bigger picture.
That's huge.
Yeah. And then making sure that reward systems are fair and equitable.
Yes. That's crucial.
So people feel valued and appreciated for their contributions.
Absolutely.
So it's about creating this culture where people feel valued, supported, and empowered to do their best work without sacrificing their well-being.
Exactly. And that's where self-care comes in.
Yes. Tell me about self-care.
Self-care is so important for preventing burnout.
Okay.
It's about prioritizing activities and practices that help us recharge and reconnect with ourselves outside of work.
So Dr. Santos talked about how she used her sabbatical to focus on non-work relationships
Yes.
and hobbies, like playing Guitar Hero.
Which I think is awesome.
It is awesome. It's like a reminder to have fun.
Right. Like work shouldn't be the only thing in our lives.
Exactly. So it's about creating a life outside of work that nourishes your soul and gives you a sense of identity and purpose.
Absolutely.
So think about your own life. What are those things that help you recharge
Mm-hmm.
and create balance? What are the activities that bring you joy?
It could be spending time in nature,
Yeah.
reading a good book, listening to music, connecting with loved ones.
Whatever it is,
Yeah.
make time for it
Prioritize it.
because you deserve it.
And sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is to slow down and give yourself permission to rest.
You know, and speaking of rest and taking care of ourselves,
Yeah.
we also need to acknowledge that sometimes, even with self-care and support,
Yeah.
things can feel really heavy.
Absolutely.
And that can lead to some really difficult thoughts and feelings.
You're right. And that's something we need to talk about more openly and honestly.
Exactly.
Because ignoring it won't make it go away.
And we want to equip you with the knowledge and the resources to navigate those challenges.
That's our goal.
So let's talk about it.
Let's do it. It's a topic that we often shy away from,
Yeah.
but it's so important to bring it into the light.
Yeah, if we don't talk about it, we can't address it.
Exactly.
And the truth is that these thoughts are more common than we might think.
They really are.
And if you're experiencing them, you are not alone, and there is help available.
That's so important to remember.
And it's a reminder that, you know, we all have moments of darkness,
Yeah.
moments when life just feels really overwhelming.
Absolutely.
But those moments don't define us.
They don't.
The statistics on suicide are definitely sobering.
Yeah.
The CDC reports that it's a leading cause of death in the U.S.,
Wow.
with a death occurring every 11 minutes.
It's a stark reminder of the urgency of this issue.
And, you know, behind these statistics are real people,
Of course.
each with their own unique story.
Each with their own reasons for struggling.
And each person deserves compassion and support.
Absolutely.
Clinical psychologist Kay Redfield Jamison, who has written extensively about suicide,
Yes.
describes each way to suicide as its own intensely private, unknowable, and terrible,
It's a profound statement.
which is why it's so important to pay attention to the warning signs.
Yes, both in ourselves and in others.
Psych Central emphasizes the importance of noticing changes in talk behavior and mood.
Okay.
So what are some specific red flags that we should be looking for?
Well, when it comes to talk, it's important to be aware of expressions of hopelessness, like someone saying things will never get better, or that they feel trapped with no way out.
Right, and sometimes it's not even that direct, right?
Yeah, it can be more subtle.
It might be just a pervasive sense of negativity or a lack of interest in things they used to enjoy.
Exactly. And also pay attention to any talk about feeling purposeless,
Okay.
like their life has no meaning or that they're a burden to others.
Those are definitely some signs that someone's struggling.
They are.
What about behavioral changes?
Well, one thing to watch for is an increase in substance use,
Okay.
whether it's alcohol, drugs, anything to kind of numb the pain.
Right, they're trying to self-medicate,
Exactly.
but that could be a dangerous path.
It can, because substance abuse can actually exacerbate mental health issues.
What other behavioral changes?
So significant alterations in sleep patterns,
Okay.
either sleeping much more than usual or having trouble sleeping at all.
Right, and that can create a vicious cycle.
It can.
Because poor sleep can really negatively impact mood and energy levels and make it even harder to cope.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then withdrawal from social activities. If someone who's normally outgoing and social suddenly starts isolating themselves, that's a cause for concern.
Right, it's like they're retreating into themselves,
Exactly.
trying to protect themselves from the world.
And while solitude can be restorative at times, prolonged isolation can actually make things worse.
And what about mood changes?
So someone struggling with suicidal thoughts might exhibit profound sadness, intense anxiety, or persistent irritability and anger.
Or maybe a deep sense of shame or worthlessness.
Yeah, like they don't deserve to be happy or loved.
So these are all really important things to be aware of.
They are.
And it's important to remember that these signs don't always mean someone is suicidal,
Right.
but they do warrant reaching out.
Yes, offering support, showing that you care.
And if you're feeling this way yourself,
Yeah,
please know that there is hope.
absolutely.
The Mental Health Foundation website has this really powerful message.
Okay.
Lots of us have thought about killing ourselves and have found a way through. You won't always feel like this.
That's such an important reminder that these feelings are not permanent.
Right.
They are waves that will eventually recede.
And talking to someone can make a world of difference.
It really can.
And sometimes that ray of light comes from unexpected places.
Oh, yeah.
I was reading this really moving blog post by someone who shared their experience with suicidal thoughts.
Okay.
And they talked about how counseling, medication, and having that supportive network helped them get through.
Yes, and there are so many resources available to help.
Right.
So let's recap the key action steps for anyone struggling with these thoughts.
Okay.
First, reach out and tell someone you trust.
Okay.
Could be a friend, a family member, a therapist, a teacher, anyone you feel safe confiding in.
Second, seek professional help.
Yes.
A doctor or therapist can provide support therapy and medication if needed.
Exactly.
And don't forget about hotlines.
Oh, that's right.
There are numerous crisis lines and support resources available 24/7.
Yes, for immediate help.
And of course, prioritizing self-care is essential.
Absolutely.
Focusing on healthy sleep, exercise, nutrition, and activities that bring you joy.
Those things are so important.
Even small acts of self-care can make a big difference.
I really can.
And finding supportive communities,
Yes.
either online or in person, where you can connect with others who understand what you're going through.
That sense of community can be incredibly powerful.
Knowing that you're not alone can make a world of difference.
You really can.
You know, reading through all these stories, I was really struck by how many people mentioned the importance of having a support system.
That's interesting.
It seems like feeling connected to others is a huge protective factor when you're struggling with suicidal thoughts.
It makes sense.
Having people, you can talk to people who listen without judgment and offer unconditional support.
It's about feeling a sense of belonging, of being seen and understood.
And sometimes that sense of purpose can come from helping others.
That's a good point.
There's this quote from Brene Brown that I love.
Yeah.
You were born worthy of love and belonging. Courage and daring are coursing through you.
Wow.
You were made to live in love with your whole heart.
I love that.
It's time to show up and be seen.
Powerful words.
It's a reminder that we all have something unique to offer the world.
Yes.
And showing up for ourselves and for others can be incredibly powerful.
It can.
But you know, sometimes showing up can be hard.
It can.
I remember reading a blog post by someone who described starting counseling as incredibly difficult.
Yeah,
They felt so much shame and stigma
I can imagine.
around seeking help,
There's so much pressure to be strong and independent.
to figure things out on our own.
Yeah, like asking for help is a sign of weakness.
But the truth is, asking for help is a sign of strength.
It is.
And the first step can be the hardest.
It can.
But once you take that step, it can open up a whole new world of support and possibilities.
So true.
There's another quote from the Mental Health Foundation website that really stuck with me.
Okay.
Tell somebody.
Yeah.
You might get some strange reactions, but don't worry.
Keep telling people.
If you're wanting to kill yourself, trust me, you're not thinking clearly right now.
It's a powerful reminder that sometimes our own judgment can be clouded when we're in a dark place.
That's why having those trusted people we can turn to is so vital.
Absolutely.
And if the first person doesn't respond the way you need them to,
Yeah.
don't give up.
Keep reaching out.
Keep reaching out until you find someone who can offer the support you deserve.
Exactly. And remember, there are professionals trained to help.
Counselors, therapists, psychiatrists.
All there to listen and guide you towards healing.
And the Mental Health Foundation also talks about creating a personal safety plan,
Oh, that's a good idea.
which I thought was a really helpful idea.
It is.
It's basically a set of strategies that you can use when you're feeling suicidal.
Like what kinds of things?
It might include things like calling a helpline, reaching out to a friend,
Okay.
or engaging in activities that help you feel grounded and safe.
So it's like a toolbox of coping mechanisms that you can access in moments of crisis. And it can also include reminders of your reasons for living, things that give you hope and make life worth fighting for.
Because even when it feels like there's nothing left,
Yeah.
there's always something.
Always.
And sometimes it's about finding those tiny flickers of light in the darkness, those moments of beauty or connection that remind us that we're not alone and that things can get better.
I love that.
And sometimes those anchors come in unexpected forms,
Like what?
like playing Guitar Hero.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned that before.
Remember? Laurie Santos mentioned that in the video?
Yes. She talked about how re-engaging with hobbies, even ones that seem silly or frivolous, helped her combat burnout.
It's not about being productive or achieving something.
Right.
It's about finding joy,
Yeah.
connecting with those parts of ourselves that make us feel alive.
Absolutely.
And, while we're talking about healing,
Yeah.
I think it's important to acknowledge that recovery is a journey.
It is.
There might be setbacks. There might be days when it feels like you're taking 2 steps back for every step forward.
That's true. It's not always a linear process.
But it's about continuing to show up for yourself, even when it's hard.
Absolutely.
It's about being patient with yourself and celebrating every small victory along the way.
And remember, you don't have to do it alone.
There are people who care about you.
Yes.
People who want to see you thrive.
And there are resources available to help you every step of the way.
So if you're struggling, please reach out.
Yes, please do.
You are worthy of support. You are worthy of happiness.
You are.
And speaking of support, there's this blog post where someone listed a bunch of helpful hints and tips for coping with depression and suicidal thoughts.
Well, that's great.
What were some of the suggestions?
Yeah, I'm curious.
Well, they talked about the importance of going deep, really getting to the heart of what's causing the pain,
That's important.
or trying to identify the triggers that make you feel worse.
Okay.
They also mentioned doing something creative as a way to process emotions. And they specifically talked about taking a photo a day
Oh, wow.
as a way to kind of focus on beauty and find moments of joy.
That's a really cool idea. It's about shifting your perspective, finding those little glimmers of hope even in the midst of darkness.
Right. And they also talk about exercise, especially when your body is full of adrenaline.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you're feeling down, it's hard to even get out of bed.
Oh, yeah.
But even just a short walk can really help shift your energy and improve your mood.
It's true. Physical activity can be incredibly beneficial for both our mental and physical health. You know, it releases endorphins, it reduces stress, and it helps improve sleep.
And they had some great advice about friendships.
Okay.
They said, even if your friends get tired of hearing about your struggles, stick with them.
Yeah,
Because true friends will support you no matter what.
absolutely. It's about surrounding yourself with people who love you unconditionally and want to see you heal.
And they also talk about being patient with medications.
Oh.
Antidepressants and other medications can take time to work. So it's important to stick with the prescribed dosage and give them a chance to do their job.
That's true. And it's also important to communicate with your doctor about any side effects you're experiencing.
Yeah.
They might be able to adjust your dosage or prescribe a different medication that works better for you.
Right. It's about finding what works for you, what helps you feel grounded and hopeful, and embracing those things with open arms. And they emphasize that depression is not a taboo word.
Yeah. It's so important to normalize conversations about mental health.
Right.
The more we talk about it, the less stigma there will be.
Exactly. And they end with a really important message. Have a laugh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because laughter truly is the best medicine.
Right.
It lightens the mood, reduces stress, reminds us that even in the darkest of times, there's still joy to be found.
And there was a point in this author's story when they realized that they hadn't been taking their antidepressants and how the absence of them made them fade away.
Wow. That's a really powerful reminder that medication can be a crucial part of treatment for some people.
Right.
It's not a sign of weakness to need medication. It's about giving yourself the support you need to feel better.
It's incredibly brave of them to share that experience.
It is.
And it highlights the importance of medication adherence, particularly when it comes to mental health.
Absolutely.
It's not about being weak or dependent. It's about giving yourself the tools you need to manage your condition and live a fulfilling life.
Exactly.
Right? It's about self-compassion,
Yes.
about recognizing that you deserve support and care just like anyone else with a medical condition.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that we all have our own unique journeys, our own struggles and triumphs. And that's okay.
It's about finding what works for you, what helps you feel grounded and hopeful, and embracing those things with open arms. And, I remember another point someone made about explaining their depression or anxiety to someone who has never experienced it themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And how that can be very difficult to do.
It's true. It can be incredibly challenging to articulate those feelings to someone who hasn't walked in your shoes.
Right. It's like trying to describe the color glue to someone who's been blind since birth.
That's a great analogy. And sometimes it can be more helpful to focus on the impact of those feelings rather than trying to explain the feelings themselves.
Yeah.
Like instead of saying, I'm depressed, you could say, I'm having trouble sleeping and concentrating, and I'm not finding joy in the things I used to love.
Right.
That way you're communicating the concrete ways in which those feelings are affecting your life, which can be easier for others to understand and empathize with.
And, I think it's also important to remember that even if someone doesn't fully understand what you're going through, they can still offer love and support.
Absolutely. Sometimes just having someone listen without judgment, someone who offers a hug or a kind word, can be incredibly healing. And even if you're struggling to find those connections in your personal life, there are always helplines and support groups where you can connect with people who understand.
That's a really important point. You are never alone.
You're not.
There are always people who care, and there are always resources available to help.
Always.
And, I think one of the most empowering messages I've come across in all of this research is that recovery is possible.
It is.
It might not be easy, it might not be quick.
Yeah.
But it is possible.
And there are so many stories of hope and resilience, people who have navigated the darkest of times and come out stronger on the other side.
That's why it's so important to hold on to hope.
Yes.
To believe that things can get better, even when it feels impossible. And to remember that asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength.
It takes courage to reach out, to admit that you need support.
Right.
But it's also an act of self-love, of recognizing that you deserve to heal and to thrive.
And, as we're wrapping up this deep dive, I'm struck by the fact that so many of these stories emphasize the importance of connection.
Yeah.
Of reaching out to others for support.
It's true. It seems like those human connections, those bonds of love and understanding are essential for healing and resilience.
Right. And it's not just about receiving support, it's also about giving it. There's something incredibly powerful about helping others, about offering a listening ear or a kind word.
Absolutely. It can give us a sense of purpose, a feeling that we're making a difference in the world. And sometimes those acts of kindness, those moments of connection, can be the very things that pull us back from the brink.
That's a beautiful thought. And it reminds me of something someone said in one of the blog posts. No regrets.
No regrets.
Yes, it was in the context of facing your fears and taking risks, but I think it applies to this too. No regrets about reaching out. No regrets about asking for help. No regrets about choosing life.
That's such a powerful message. And it's a reminder that we always have a choice. We can choose to stay stuck in the darkness, or we can choose to reach for the light.
And sometimes the smallest act of courage, the tiniest spark of hope, can be enough to ignite a fire that burns away the darkness and illuminates the path forward.
It's about believing in the possibility of healing, of transformation, of a brighter future.
And it's about taking those first tentative steps toward that future, even if it feels scary or uncertain, because every step, no matter how small, is a victory. And you know what really resonated with me was this idea of having a safety plan.
Yeah.
It's like having a roadmap for those moments when you feel lost and overwhelmed.
I love that analogy. It gives you a sense of direction and concrete steps you can take to navigate those difficult emotions.
Exactly. And it's not just for people who are struggling with suicidal thoughts. It's for anyone who wants to build resilience and develop healthy coping mechanisms.
It's like having a toolkit of strategies that you can use to manage stress, anxiety, and any other challenges life throws your way.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I encourage you to take some time to create your own safety plan. Think about what brings you comfort, who you can reach out to for support, and what activities help you feel grounded and centered.
And remember, you are not alone. There are people who care about you and resources available to help you every step of the way.
So be kind to yourself, embrace hope, and keep moving forward one step at a time.
Beautifully said. And I would add, don't underestimate the power of vulnerability. Allowing yourself to be seen, to share your struggles with others, can be incredibly liberating and healing. So I'll leave you with this question. What small act of self-compassion can you offer yourself today? What step, no matter how small, can you take towards a brighter, more hopeful future?
That's a powerful question. And I encourage all of you listening to take a moment to reflect on it. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of happiness. And remember, you are not alone.